Hi, everybody. This is Peter Schiff. It's January 25th, 2012. Well, last night, the president delivered the traditional State of the Union address. This is his last one before the 2012 elections. And certainly the union that he was describing was not the United States, at least not the realistic version, maybe the fantasy that lives somewhere in the president's mind. But the economy is not sound. He said the state of the economy was strengthening. Well, clearly the Federal Reserve doesn't agree with that assessment. This afternoon, the Federal Reserve announced that it was going to throw the weakening economy yet another lifeline. It said that the 0% interest rates, which it has already committed will be here until mid-2013, now it's going to be here till late 2014, maybe 2015. Clearly, if the Federal Reserve thought the economy was improving, it wouldn't need this artificial prop to keep sustaining it. In fact, ironically, one of the many misstatements that the president made last night, he said we have to be careful not to return to the policies of the past that gave us the housing bubble and the financial crisis. Well, maybe he's sort of right, because we can't return to those policies because returning to them would mean that we left them. We never did. We continue to implement the very policies that the president is criticizing. The reason we had a real estate bubble and the ensuing collapse and the financial crisis was because the Federal Reserve kept interest rates too low and the government was subsidizing mortgages. Well, what are we doing now? Well, the Fed has got them even lower, and now they're keeping them there even longer. And what is another part of the president's speech last night? More government involvement in the mortgage market. We want to extend more taxpayer subsidies to help people who are underwater on their mortgages refinance anyway, despite the fact that they have no equity, and put additional risk on the U.S. taxpayer and further distort the economy. The president and the Federal Reserve are now conspiring to create a much bigger crisis than the one Obama thinks he solved. Far from solving it, he's made it worse. The union is not strengthening, it is weakening. We are in much weaker financial shape than we were the day the president was sworn into office. In fact, for his hour-long speech, he barely even touched on the real threats plaguing our nation. Did he talk about the debt? No. What did the president talk about? He talked about creating new government agencies, hiring more bureaucrats. Well, we can't even afford to pay the salaries of the ones we already have. He talked about new ways for the federal government to spend money. Not once did he warn that we're broke, that we have to dramatically cut back on government spending to head off a financial crisis, a sovereign debt crisis. Not once did he bring up the problems in Europe and how those problems are a warning sign for things to come here in America, and we better heed that warning and do something. He didn't call on sacrifice from anybody. Oh, except the 1% or the 1% of the 1% that he wants to raise taxes on. No. The president said that 99% of Americans, all the Americans that earn under $250,000 a year, you're all going to get a tax cut. Well, where's the sacrifice there? Is he cutting any government spending? No. How are we going to restore fiscal solvency if we're cutting taxes for 99% of the taxpayers and if we're not cutting any government spending? No, government spending is going to keep on growing. We are borrowing and spending and printing ourselves over the edge of an economic cliff. But the president also displayed a significant lack of understanding of capitalism, of American history. I mean, one of the many things that he said was that we owe our success as a nation to the fact that we work as a team. No, we don't. We owe our success to the fact that we're individuals in America. We're not a team. This is not a collectivist society. We all work for ourselves. We pursue our own self-interest. We have a constitution that talks about individual rights, property rights. These are not team rights. This is not a collective society. You know, we tried that once. The Pilgrims tried that. We tried to go it as a team, and we almost starved to death. It wasn't until we went to a man-to-man, every man for himself, that we got the benefits of capitalism. You know, yes, when we all work pursuing our own self-interest, other people benefit through the invisible hand, but Barack Obama doesn't like the invisible hand that Adam Smith wrote about. He wants the heavy hand of government. He wants government to organize us all as a team so we can work together. In fact, to create jobs, the president was basically calling on the patriotism of American companies to hire Americans because it's patriotic. Go out and create jobs. Well, I've got news for the president. Companies aren't formed to create jobs. That's not why they're there. People don't invest in companies because the companies promise to create jobs. They invest in companies to make a profit. People don't sacrifice to start a business. They don't work hard to grow a business simply because they want to give paychecks to other people. People want to make money for themselves. Now, the fact of the matter is, in pursuit of private profit, companies, small businesses end up creating jobs. That is a benefit of capitalism. That's part of a visible hand, but that is not why these companies are organized, and companies do not have a patriotic duty to create jobs in America. The fact of the matter is, if businesses aren't creating jobs, it's because the government is making it unprofitable for them to do so. The fact that so many companies are outsourcing is a function of the U.S. government making it too expensive to hire Americans. So if President Obama really wants companies to stop outsourcing the jobs, he has to stop giving them the incentive to do that. Why don't we repeal rules and regulations, lower taxes, and a lot of these regulations lead to excessive litigation. If we can reduce the cost of hiring Americans, then a lot more Americans are going to get jobs. But as long as we run up the price tag on American labor, companies are going to rightly look abroad to try to make a profit by hiring foreigners instead of Americans. You know, another part of his speech that was inconsistent with itself, the president was talking about more aid, extending more relief, more subsidies to students so that they can afford the higher cost of college tuitions. And then he later admonished universities for raising tuitions and basically was pleading with universities not to raise tuitions. Well, the only reason they're raising tuitions is because the government is subsidizing their customers. They're giving students money to bid up tuitions. If the president said, "Hey, no more subsidies. We're not going to make these loans anymore," well, then he wouldn't have to beg colleges not to raise their tuitions. They'd have no choice. The market would force them to cut tuitions. It's because the government is subsidizing students that the universities can keep on raising tuitions, despite the fact that Obama is upset that they're doing that. The president said that those who think America is a nation in decline don't know what they're talking about. The truth is, the person who doesn't know what he's talking about is the president. America is a nation in decline. It's in decline because of Obama. It's because of politicians who preceded Obama who pursued similar policies. How can he be oblivious to the fact that our economy is disintegrating beneath his feet? The fact that he can look around the world and think that foreign opinion of America has never been higher. We are rapidly becoming a laughingstock. The world understands the predicament that we're in. More and more people have figured that out. That's why more and more central banks are having to artificially prop up the currency. Yes, the problems in Europe have temporarily obscured the greater problems looming here in the United States, but that mask is going to be ripped off pretty quickly, and the full focus of the global fear is going to be pointed right at the U.S. Treasury, and the U.S. dollar. You know, one of the reasons that Obama says that we can't solve the problems that are facing us, the problems that he clearly doesn't understand, is because he says members of the opposition party, the Republicans, are clinging to rigid ideologies, and they should be willing to compromise. Well, what are these rigid ideologies that the president is accusing Republicans of clinging to? Well, capitalism, freedom, liberty, the Constitution, sound money. These are the rigid values that we're supposed to abandon. The fact of the matter is, it's because we have already abandoned those ideologies that the country is in so much trouble. Salvation lies not in abandoning them even more, but in re-embracing them, in holding firmly and steadfast to those values, to those ideologies that the founding fathers held so dearly and wrote as law into our Constitution. That's what we need to do. Unfortunately, we're getting none of that from this president or this Congress. So unfortunately, the State of the Union is anything but sound. It is extremely precarious. We are teetering on the edge of a cliff. The Federal Reserve, this president and Congress are going to make sure to push it over the edge of the cliff. In the meantime, what we've got to do is protect ourselves. What happened in the market today after the Federal Reserve announced it was going to keep interest rates at zero for as long as it will? Gold was up over $40. In fact, it was up over $50 because it was down about $10 before the Fed announcement. It closed up better than $40. If you look at the gold ETF, the dollar turned around. It was stronger. It reversed. It closed at a new low for this move down. Bond prices initially rallied, but they quickly surrendered a lot of those gains. Ultimately, this is very negative for the longer end of the bond market. And if you listen to some of the things that Ben Bernanke said in the press conference following this announcement, he basically let the cat out of the bag. According to Ben Bernanke, we can't have inflation of less than 2% because that's too dangerous. Because if it was under 2%, we might actually have deflation one year. And so Ben Bernanke wants to make sure that inflation is at least 2%. Well, he's succeeding there. It's a lot higher than 2%. In fact, even based on the government's own numbers, the CPI, prices were up 3% in 2011. Well, I think they're going to be up a lot more than 3% in 2012. In fact, they were up a lot more than 3% in 2011 had the government accurately reported them. But because the government was dishonest and used the CPI to mask how high inflation really is, the government, the Federal Reserve, is using that same mask to hide behind this 0% interest rates. What is the real reason that the Fed is going to keep interest rates at zero as far as the eye can see? And by the way, I don't think it's going to make it till 2015. I think it's going to hit the fan long before then. We will have a currency crisis and a sovereign debt crisis that will force interest rates much, much higher. But the reason they have to keep them so low is to artificially support a phony economy. Contrary to what the president thinks, this economy is a disaster about to happen. The only thing standing between us and economic Armageddon is 0% interest rates. The Fed knows it. Obama just hasn't figured it out. But the problem is the longer they keep interest rates this low, the more they distort the economy, the more they screw it up, and the more they exacerbate the problems that we're going to have to unwind. The government, the economy is going to have to correct the damage the government created. We're going to have to reallocate these resources. We're going to have to purge the economy of these malinvestments. And unfortunately, because we are not doing what the president said, we are pursuing the policies that caused the last financial crisis. The next financial crisis is much greater, and it's going to inflict far more damage on the average American because of all the things that the Federal Reserve is doing and the things that Congress and the president continue to do. In the meantime, we got to protect ourselves, buy gold and silver before the price goes any higher. Remember, I got a company, Euro Pacific Precious Metals. Check us out if you want to buy some gold and silver without getting ripped off. Also, you can go to my free special report at goldscams.com to make sure you don't get ripped off when you buy gold and silver. Also, don't forget, listen to me on schiffradio.com. I do this show every weekday live from 10 a.m. to noon, schiffradio.com to listen. Also, if you're not a current member of my YouTube channel, don't forget, click on the upper right-hand corner of the video and subscribe to this channel. And if you like what you hear, click like, because the more likes we have, the more subscribers we have, the more likely it is that other people will see this video and know the truth. Bye for now.